Being a DM can seem like a daunting task, so I want to make a series of videos for starter DMs that'll make the whole thing seem a little bit more manageable. Today, I'll be covering the basics of world building. All that and more on today's page. Hello one and all, and thank you for opening up your Dungeon Master's Handbook. My name is Russell, and on today's page we have the first steps that a DM should take before starting a campaign. Now, there's a little lie in that sentence because this comes with two steps: world building and creating characters. As for which of these two steps should come first, it is widely debated between DMs. Some believe that a world should be created that accommodates anything that the player's characters want to be. Others believe that DMs should create a world that then the players make characters that fit into. I like to do something that's a little bit of a middle ground. I will make a world that is rough around the edges and has broad details, but not specifics about organizations and people. For example, I might know that a town is known for its fishing, but I won't know any dominant companies that do the shipping or the names of any government officials there. I'd like to know the leaders of entire states and their government system, but not how they interact with their people. To get to these finer details, I turn to my players. Going back to the fishing town example, if a player has a sailor background or something similar, that will give me details about the people within the city. NPCs from their backstory could make up some of the important people within one of the shipping or fishing companies. And looking at the government example, if a player says that they've had several run-ins with guards or the military that paints the government in a bad light, I might make it so that that government is a bit more oppressive of its people, and thus help shape the personality of the state leaders that I've already created. The analogy that I like to use is that I'm looking at my world with a blurry lens, and my players help me focus and see a clearer picture. Another strategy that I build my world with is delaying the details. If no party member is from a city and you don't plan on having the party discover that city anytime soon, then you can leave the description of it as vague as you need it to be. Once the party begins to head in that direction, then you can flesh out the details of the town to fit what experience you want the party to have. If you want a few sessions of political intrigue, you might make it so that there is a doppelganger impersonating a government official in the city, and the party has to help find out who it is. If you're more in the mood for a hack-and-slash adventure, then maybe a nearby giant settlement has been growing increasingly active, preparing for an attack. I also like to make my world feel real on a very broad scale. I love making maps that I can give to my party members so they can actually see the world that they're going to be diving into. For me, it's one of the most fun parts of world building, creating countries and understanding how they interact. There are lots of different types of governments you can use for your countries, so here's a helpful table for you to use. Also, once you know what kind of government that a country is going to have, it makes the society of that place a lot clearer and also affects how it'll interact with other countries. For example, in a gerontocracy where the eldest of the nation rule, you'd then understand that people are given more respect only with age. I bet that this tradition has been passed down for generations, and I bet it might be inhabited by some sort of race that lives a very long time, like elves or furbolgs. I'd expect that kind of country to be pretty self-sufficient and stick to themselves mostly, and also to strive not too much for advancements in technology. Some ideas of a mageocracy could be a tyrannical lich who has control over an area and defends its border to the teeth. Or it could be a council of high-level arcanists who want to better the area through the creation of new magics. Creatures that could rule an area could be good or evil, such as angels or devils, dragons, vampires, or even a beholder. Now, creating a map can seem overwhelming, so I wanted to let you guys know about a very helpful resource that I've found that makes my map building way easier. It's called Asgar's Fantasy Map Generator. It's an incredibly useful tool that lets you make maps that are incredibly detailed without having you do too much work. To show you how it works, I wanted to make a world alongside you guys. I'll be making everything from the landmass down to the broad strokes of nations and countries. I started off by getting rid of the landmass that the website had made for me. I wanted to make my own. Then I got also rid of any pre-made nations that were already on the world. I had an idea for two separate continents with one smaller continent to the south that was an independent country that didn't interact much with the others. I also wanted to include a lot of physical borders, so you'll see me make lots of mountain ranges, isthmuses, islands, and gulfs. After that, I rolled on my table to determine what kind of nation would be the first up. Funnily enough, I rolled a 20 on my first roll, as you saw. So first would be a rule by some sort of creature. I realized now that the website had pre-generated about 300 towns, or burgs as they call it, so I had to go and delete all of those before I could continue. I wanted this nation that I had rolled to be ruled by a red dragon, so I put it in the mountains between two lowlands. Whatever nations were on either side of these mountains would have to go through the dragon's territory to trade between the two. I made the country red for flair. I also constantly had the height map on so I could see the edges for physical borders, so I'd know where to stop drawing. Now, I sped up the video quite a bit, but I rolled a 19 actually for my second country, meaning that it would be a majocracy. I was kind of hoping for this so that I could make my island nation a majocracy, so that worked out well. Generally, I see this society as focusing exclusively on magical development, and I could even see their capital being a floating city. I had another city that would be more for common folk also on the continent, just to flesh things out. I rolled another time, and I got plutocracy/aristocracy, and I went with plutocracy, where only the wealthy can rule. I picked this bit of land for it and stopped the borders at the foothills of the mountains as a physical border. Next up, I rolled an 18, so it would be a gerontocracy, where the eldest rule. I wanted this one to also be relatively independent, so I put it alone on a peninsula. It is definitely set in its traditional ways and is against any other power coming in and modifying that. Once again, I added another couple of towns for flair. Then I rolled another 19, and I didn't really want another majocracy, so I re-rolled and got a military dictatorship, where you rule by force. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be an oppressive government, but it tends to be. I put it near the dragon, so the military's excuse for having such power is that they're protecting people from the dragon and other monsters nearby. Once again, adding a few more towns. Next, I rolled a democracy. So I wanted this one to be pretty large and take up a good bit of land, so I included some of the mountains so that it would have a variety of biomes included with it. As well, this country is going to be generally peaceful and have good relations with its neighbors. Then I rolled a 7 for an empire, so I wanted this one to also span quite a bit of land. I put it next to the dragon as well for a feud between the emperor and the dragon for diplomatic disputes. I used the mountains once again as physical borders, so it would take up most of the lowlands on the northern part of that continent. I rolled another aristocracy and decided to put it near the other, so that maybe these two were once one nation and had since split off. But I wanted to leave the mountains open because I had an idea for some sort of dwarven nation, but I wanted to see what kind of government they would have. Then, yet again, I rolled another majocracy, and I just didn't want another. So I rolled again, and this time I got a kingdom. I pictured this one being in a desert surrounded by mountains and the Gulf, so it might be inhabited by Yuan-ti, Goliaths, or Earth Genasi. Not too sure, but there's definitely some ideas there. Next up, I rolled another empire, and for this one I pictured it being more like a typical empire with a hierarchy and making it more militaristic, so I had occupy the nearby islands to show off its naval superiority. It also shares borders with another empire and a kingdom, so there might be some disputes there. And last but not least, for my dwarf nation, I rolled another military dictatorship. I like once again the idea that because they live up in mountains and do lots of mining, the military has to be in charge to protect people from the monsters that live underground or in the mountains around them. Also, dwarves and mountains just make sense. And so there it is. With this website, this whole process for me took about a half hour, and now I have a map that I can give to players and that tells them a little bit about each country and allows me to add more detail in later. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is creating some space where no country is claiming. This could be up for grabs by anything your imagination could think of. It could be that the area is just physically inaccessible, or it could be that some monster is living there in isolation. Some more of the features of this website include the ability to create trade and travel routes, modify biomes and temperature, and even manage levels of precipitation. But the coolest thing that they added recently was the ability to make custom emblems and flags for cities and countries, and I may have spent a little bit too much time doing that for my world. So this has kind of turned from a world building video into a map making video, so I'll be sure to follow this one up with a true world building one, where I'll show you my current world and explain how I got all the details from my players. Plus, I have a few more helpful internet tools that I want to show you guys, so stick around for that next video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned a little bit about how I like to create the rough designs of my world. Subscribe to make sure you see that next video where I'll go over the details of how to go in depth into towns and cities. And, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you find yourself at a table real soon.